Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Advanced English. Today we have a native English speaker conversation for you, and I'm joined by the one and only Greg. So welcome, Greg. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
And, the reason we do this is predominantly to give you an opportunity to have listening comprehension practice, as well as to listen to the pronunciation, the connected speech that's happening, listening to our intonation and our prosody, and the emphasis we place on words, and also to learn some new vocabulary and phrases, and lastly, to get a general sense of, different topics that might come across your day-to-day or some, interesting topics that you can bring up for what we call dinner table conversation. So really, it's about enriching you and your language learning experience even further, right? Not just the lessons, but also these conversations. So without further ado, today's topic is all about how to be a high performer. And this can apply to different arenas in your life. It can apply to your English language learning, for example, among other things. So we're going to get into that. All right. So a high performer. We probably should start off by defining what this means.
Yeah, it's interesting because performer, when you hear that word, you think of, like an acrobat.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it's funny. I think of like an opera singer or a ballet dancer.
Any of those, right? Yeah. Someone on stage performing for an audience.
Yes.
But performance can also mean how you yourself complete a task, right? How someone completes a task. So, in an office context, you typically will get a performance review at the end of the year or potentially every quarter.
Yep.
And that performance review goes through the various sort of metrics that are used to measure how well you did your job, right? So to perform well, to perform a job is to sort of basically is to do something. So a high performer is simply someone who does a job really well.
Right. So if you think of like an elite athlete, they're high performers, right? And what does that entail? That's the big thing. So if you're thinking about what's the overall overarching goal here, let's say to be a high performer, you need to backcast, meaning you need to think about, okay, in order for me to get to Z, what is my A, B, C, all the way through the letters of the alphabet to be able to get to that goal, right? And so I think, there are many ways of becoming a high performer, but I think today we're going to just touch upon a few of them so that we can really start thinking about, what are some of the characteristics, what are some of the adjectives, what are some of the, descriptions of a high performer. I don't know about you, Greg, but the first one that comes to mind for me is discipline.
Yeah, that is a good one. I like that. Discipline, right? Discipline, when I think of discipline, I think of the ability to, do something regardless of how difficult it is, regardless of how many times you've done it before, right? It's the ability to sort of commit to something, right?
Yeah.
I would say discipline is this ability to get yourself to do something irrespective of whether or not you would like to do that thing.
Right. So if you talk to an athlete, there might be days where they're not feeling that great, but they still will get their training in, right?
Yeah.
They'll still do what they need to do. They'll still get in their sleep, even though they might want to go out with their friends, or they might want to have that extra piece of cake, or, whatever it might be. They think about, okay, well, my goal is this, so what am I supposed to do to get there? I need to think about my discipline here with this.
Exactly. And for, someone who's not an athlete, just, your typical desk jockey, as they say, someone who works at a desk. Discipline could simply mean making sure that you turn off your computer at the right time at the end of the day, making sure that you get the right sleep, making sure that you stay active to keep your brain sharp, making sure that you're not sitting all day, right?
Taking breaks, walking around.
At the same time, making sure that you stay focused, right? When you are working, making sure that you're not distracted by things around you. All of those are things that don't necessarily come naturally to you, but you impose upon yourself in order to get to perform at a higher level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, things to start thinking about. And with respect to your English language learning, maybe it's, I'm going to listen to the Advanced English podcast on my way to work every day, right? That might be your way of having your discipline about doing something. It could be also maybe spending 10 minutes of each day writing a journal in English, right? Something like that where you're focusing on a skill and you're laser focused into it and you're doing it consistently. So I think that brings me to the next one, which is consistency.
Yeah, consistency is almost a subset of discipline.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
In that it's a form of discipline, doing something continuously, right? Doing something, let's put it this way, consistency is often the differentiator between, someone who fails and someone who succeeds.
Yeah, definitely.
So consistency actually reminds me of a meme that I see a lot, and I think is very effective. And what we have in this meme is a miner.
Okay.
And he is digging toward a pile of gems.
Okay.
But he can't see that pile of gems, right? So you can just see the tunnel that he's made, and it's a very long tunnel. He's come a very long way, but he doesn't know if he's close to the gems or not, right?
Okay.
You see the little gems at the end, and they're a little sort of air pocket. And he is just a tiny, tiny, sliver from getting there. And you can see that he's turning around and giving up.
Oh, no.
Right? And so if he had just taken 2 more swings with his pick, he would have hit the pile of gems and gotten the reward.
Oh, my goodness.
And I think that's a really good sort of metaphor for consistency, right?
Yeah.
The people who succeed are consistent and they keep pushing. And eventually, even if they're not getting the results they want up front, eventually over time, that consistency will yield the outcome that they were looking for.
Yeah.
Whereas giving up, you might not actually reach that reward, or you might be very close, but because you weren't consistent, you just didn't get there.
Yeah, consistency is key. It's definitely one of the most important qualities to succeed in any area of life. And what's interesting, there was a statistic somewhere, but the general sense of it was the percentage of people who give up were actually very close to completing that task or to achieving that goal. So the point here is that, when you feel that urge to give up, that means that you're actually really close. So keep persevering. Like, do not give in to that temptation of calling it quits, because you're actually a lot closer to that goal than you think, right? And even if the outcome doesn't turn out the way that you had thought or had fathomed that it would, all of that preparation that you did to get you to that next level is going to serve you in the next thing, for the next challenge. So don't think that that struggle was, done in vain or was done without any purpose, because regardless of that specific outcome, it will still serve you in the future.
Yeah, often just the act of being consistent means that you're developing and getting better at whatever it is that you're iterating on, that you're repeating, right? So, the most obvious example is an athlete, right?
Yeah.
They just keep practicing at a sport. They get, better and better. If it's soccer, you're getting better at your dribbling and your, evasion tactics and so forth. So the point simply is, if you continue to do something, whether or not you get the desired outcome, you're building up these skills that can be applied elsewhere. And what's cool is that the experience that you develop from this consistency kind of compounds on itself. So the work output that you get from the first hour or the first day or the first year of being consistent is then eclipsed, right? It's the second year, it's eclipsed by the second year of output, right? So the more consistent you are, the more yield you get from that for a given amount of effort, which is just kind of a cool element of being consistent.
And you see that a lot with weight training, right? That's why people ask you, they might not ask you per se, but what's your training age, right? It's very different. It's a different calculus for someone who's been training for 5 years, let's say at the gym, strength training, versus someone who's been training for 20 years, right? And just the ability to, let's say, put on muscle mass or get stronger, right? That's going to be a different situation. You cannot really compare those two people in those parts of their journeys because it's just different, right? So that consistency does pay off because it builds on itself, right? So that's the idea there. And I always love that because it's like, okay, your goal for now might be in sight, right? Let's say we're digging, we're mining. We might not see the gems, but we know they're there, right? And then we inch a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and that's very exciting, right? Even if we can't see the gems, but you can imagine that you see them, right?
And even if the gems weren't there, right? The point you were making before, even if the gems aren't there when you get to that sort of end point, hey, you're a lot stronger because you've been, hacking away for a while. You know how to use a pick. Maybe you can take that pick and go find another place, and maybe there'll be gems there. So those are those skills that you develop along the way.
Right, like resourcefulness. The other one is time management, right? Time management is definitely something that I think doesn't get enough consideration. In this world of this hyper-connected, hyper-digitalized, hyper go, we're losing focus. We're getting more and more distracted. We have notifications left and right, messages beaming back and forth. We're just sucked into this information black hole, and it's very easy to just lose track of time or not set enough time constraints around something that we want to do. So with people who are training for something, they might get up a little bit early, they might go to bed a little bit earlier just to fit in something. Right, so that is important.
Time management is critical, actually, and I actually think about it more so as working smart, right?
Yeah.
Making the most of the time that you have. Time is our most finite resource, right? You can always make more money. You can always work harder, but you have a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to get the most out of your day, you need to make sure that the time you allot to a specific task is the sort of minimum you need to get it done, right? If you allot yourself too much time, then you're taking away from time to do something else.
Yeah.
And time has this funny way of sort of expanding to fill the task that you give it, right? Or I said that in kind of the reverse. A task has the way of expanding to fill the time that you give it, right? So if you give yourself 2 hours to write an email, you'll take those 2 hours, you'll really, what's the word? Nitpick and, equivocate over your wording and so forth, making sure the grammar's just right, and you'll probably revise it 5 or 6 times. Look, if it's a very important email, maybe that's worth it.
Yeah.
In most cases, though, you don't need that much time. So if instead you just gave yourself 15 minutes to make that same email, it might not be as good, but it's probably like 80% as good. And so that's good enough. And that frees up another hour and 45 minutes to do other things. So I find that top performers are very good at making the most of limited time and also creating time constraints for themselves, potentially even artificially, right? Creating their own barriers for time so that they can get things done quickly, efficiently, maybe not perfectly, but good enough.
Absolutely. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with setting these artificial deadlines or due dates, because sometimes, especially if you're working on something that maybe is not ever done, right? It's very easy to just let the task expand given the time that we have, right? But instead, if you say, okay, by next week or by next month, I'm going to achieve X, Y, Z, or learn this or do that or level up in this way, then you're starting to think about, okay, I only have this much time to do that. Let me try. Let me see what I got. Let's see what the output looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So these are a few of the, really important skills to have when you're starting to think about leveling up with your performance, to create that higher output, to have more stamina and endurance with the work that you're doing, right? And thinking about how to become an even higher performer than you are already. And a lot of that has to do with not just working hard, but even more so working smart and what that looks like, right? And so we talked about the discipline, the consistency, the time management skills, as well as the time constraints that we need to put in place to be able to achieve that. So I'm curious to hear from you. What are some other skills that are needed or philosophies of life to have and mindsets to have when you're trying to level up and trying to become an even higher performer than you already are? So share that with us in the community, and you can share that in YouTube if you scroll down and type in your comments in the description, in the comments actually, and then also in Spotify, you can find the community tab and share that in the Q&A. And speaking of Spotify, if you love our podcast and wherever you listen to the podcast, please be sure to leave us a nice review. You can leave up to 5 stars. So that really helps us out. It definitely puts a smile on Greg's face. So we want that to continue, right? And mine as well. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to see you in another conversation and lesson very, very soon. Until then, keep up the awesome work, and we'll see you then. All right. Bye for now.